When asked what journalism is, Christiane Amanpour, chief international anchor for CNN, said journalism is not a popularity contest, it is a public service. Journalism is the life and blood of society. Opinions form from what we've learned, the majority of that information coming from some form of journalism. But what if journalism was self-serving? What if the reason someone's writing journalistic pieces is to sate their own ego or wealth? It's not an unanswered question. You see it all around. Every popular news station has an agenda they sell to their customers. Articles about the benefits of soda sponsored by Coca-Cola. I'm here today that argue some of the most popular VR journalists make several mistakes in their effort to help the public, actually hurting many of the victims involved. We'll be focused on the two most prominent journalists, VRM and Brandon FM, who are the biggest examples of the type of journalism I see issues with such a focus on cinematography and flashiness that the actual journalism appears like a side piece. I'd like to clarify that this is not a hit piece, or with the goal of insulting anyone's investigative work itself. Despite me having my qualms with the styles in which Viram and Brandon present their information, it'd be absurd to me to claim that their investigations were themselves bad for the most part. With that, I'd like to move on to my main argument for this video. I believe that the style in which the information presented in these types of videos is excessive in its self-indulgence, almost focusing more on branding than on the content itself. For this section, I'll be focusing on Viram. For some context, Viram has no publicly stated formal education in investigation or law. Viram's interest lies much further on the side of film and general dramatics, as mentioned in his bio on Twitter, and what he says on Twitter, and what he does on Twitter. And he also produced his own movie. Now, this wouldn't be a problem, love movies, if he could separate his two interests into their own compartments, but he continuously fails to do so. This becomes a problem when he's presenting information about rape or pedophilia and showing it off with the cadence of a cartoon detective. This episode here. There we go. Like this episode here. He randomly decides to have a lengthy scene of him walking in and turning on the lights of a nightclub. Who is this for? Is that nightclub somehow helping the victim of these crimes? It's theatrics piled over actual important information. As a victim of some abuse and a friend of many who have been abused, I feel frustrated by the extensive amount of unnecessary content he adds to his videos. Especially when you remember that the information could have come out so much sooner if he wasn't so focused on visuals. There are many sections of his videos that have absolutely no reason to be there. Scene 5 of the video I just referenced attributes 3 minutes to this expose of a pedophile to complaining that they ripped his avatar. While I understand that getting your avatar ripped isn't enjoyable, I think pedophilia should have been focused on. If you wanted to do something unrelated to the issues, why not make a separate video? Give something to the Patreon members. God knows you're asking a lot of them. Similar to every classic cop drama you'll see on TV, there's always the old police chief who's done with the antics of the youngins, which, while an interesting narrative for children, is a very ignorant way to look at the real world. Vigilantism operates without the constraint that actual law-abiding government workers work under. These constraints, laws, may seem first to be inefficient bureaucracy, but it has a purpose. Malpractice within investigations could lead to the entire case being dismissed or thrown out. I will be talking about US court laws in this section, as it's the type I'm educated in and the type most of these two subjects fall under. Much of the evidence they provide in their videos would not be admissible in court, much of it falling under unfair prejudice, character evidence, tampering or alteration, violation of discovery rules, confidentiality rights, chain of custody issues, and failure to lay a foundation. All of these could invalidate their evidence. I would like to focus on chain of custody issues, because that could be especially harmful to both the victims and the legal system. I'd like to focus on chain of custody issues because this could be especially harmful to both the victims and the legal system. Evidence in a criminal trial requires careful, specific documentation to be used in court. Evidence needs to be uncoerced, unedited, and legal. A majority of the evidence they present fails one of these three. This issue exponentially grows when the legal argument can be made that the evidence provided was made for the economic benefit of the investigator. I have extreme doubts that any of these videos will lead to a sentencing other than those already in the process of being in prison before the video was released. During many times with these videos, they make mistakes in their investigations that hurt the quality of their evidence, or make a joke out of investigative journalism itself. This section will be focused on Brandon FM. Brandon's video, Mystery of a VRChat Predator, is the most poignant example of these issues. He makes several major mistakes, most of them revolving around how he interacted with a minor. We'll be calling them Belle for the rest of this video. She contacts Brandon in an unnecessarily cryptic way, if they were a villain from Batman. They explain, once decoded, that they had evidence about something that he'd want to know about. This is where the investigation should have ended. Investigating these issues is not a game. It's not a puzzle for someone to solve. Entertaining these messages was the first of Brandon's mistakes. Despite this, he continues to track her down, finding her and joining a world she was in. After what feels like an hour of talking about the room he appeared in, he approaches Belle and begins to talk with her. The conversation boils down to saying, hey, figure out the meaning of the song if you want to continue. Once again, this is a very poor path to go down. You're just being played with. Despite all of that, Brandon goes about the worst way of doing this, losing days of time playing Amori, the game the song was from. While this would be necessary if you were living in the 1960s, this is a poor way to use valuable time. Google will state this song contains themes of depression, hallucination, heavily implied suicide, murder, what does that say? Regret and trauma. That took me 3 minutes to find. Half of that was trying to find a source from over 2 years ago, so it was before his video. The massive time sink ends up with Belle admitting they were groomed and then blocking Brandon. Now this seems like a good step. They've admitted what's going on. However, you see in the next chapter that they were rushing because they were being coerced to do so. If Brandon used his time more efficiently, he could have saved that girl so much grief. And for what? Theatrics. No one's watching this thinking, yeah, you're right, I wouldn't have understood this if you didn't have a deep understanding of Amori's lore and content. This brings me to the crux of this video's argument. Wasted time. Most of these creators waste their time, waste time during investigations, hurting the victims, waste time editing flashy sequences, making montages. These videos could come out weeks earlier if it weren't for such unnecessary overhead. People could know and avoid these people. Possible victims could be steered away. Instead, we have someone more focused on their own image than on advocating effectively for the victims they write about. I will excuse some of Brendan FM's mistakes. He was incredibly young for what he was doing and when he started doing it. He was 17 or 18 when he produced his first video for the Brendan FM channel. It was almost an hour long, an excellent expose. Brendan, of the two careers I'm discussing, is far better at actual journalism, his modern content having far less stupid garbage. VRChat, on the other hand, doesn't get this empathy. His videos where he talks about real cases he investigates are interspersed with his self-centered rants on philosophy and his god-awful attempts at humor. This is primarily because he acts within a character, a poorly written one. His investigative efforts, while impressive, feel like a sideshow to his dramatic antics, which make it hard to actually figure out what he's presenting. These videos don't feel like they're for the victims. They feel like they're for VRChat's indulgence in his own character. You may be saying, well, this is great and all, but what can I do, right? Tell people who can do something and do it well. Don't post videos boasting about your investigations. There are multiple places you can submit a tip. Whether it be report.cybertip.org, or if you think you have a strong enough case, actually calling the police. Fancy, it's not flashy, but it's the right thing to do. You can make a difference. You can get criminals in jail. But you don't do it with a cigar in your hand and a voice filter. You do it through unappreciated hard work. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't be doing this for appreciation. If you're investigating, you should be doing it to avenge the victims of these crimes. If you can't handle that, don't bother. I'll use this time at the ending to remind all of you not to harass Brandon or VRChat. They've made mistakes, hurt people, but they will not improve through vicious harassment. Have a good day.